Hello and welcome to this week's vlog, which is going to be introducing you to my mental health. And what I mean by that is, because as you know, probably know, I've done a few videos on mental health before and I've mentioned it a lot on Instagram. But this is going to be an introduction, as in when I was first diagnosed, why I was first diagnosed and what happened then. Because I feel like recently with things that have happened with my operation, all the fertility things, the miscarriage and everything, the way I've coped with it and the battles and things I've had to overcome throughout it are all rooted in when I was originally diagnosed with depression. So I thought the best thing to do is to introduce you to that, and then you might understand more some of the things that I've referenced before and that I'm going to reference in the future. I was first diagnosed with depression and anxiety when I was about 13 years old, which was 21 years ago, I think, yes. And I was taken to the doctors by my mum, because I wasn't eating. And the reason my mum knew I wasn't eating was because my friend at school told her mum that I was throwing my lunch away and she wasn't seeing me eating things. And her mum obviously was worried about that, so she phoned my mum and told me that I wasn't eating, I was chucking my lunch away and stuff. And I wasn't eating breakfast, and I was eating very small amounts at dinner, because we used to sit around the table, so I couldn't like chuck it away or take it up to my room and not do anything with it. So mum decided to take me to the doctors. And I sort of, when I was at the doctor's, I sort of didn't really say anything really, because my mum's one of those mums that sort of has a set view of how she thinks she knows me, and will just sort of say stuff to the doctor. So the doctor told me that I was depressed, and that I was too young to have antidepressants, and that I needed to go and see a counsellor, but she couldn't give my mum any numbers for a counsellor, she couldn't refer me to a counsellor, and she couldn't advise me on where to go for a counsellor. So my mum ended up asking a friend who was a nurse if there was any counsellors that she could recommend, and she recommended this place in Nottingham called Base 51, which I don't think exists anymore, but it was basically free counselling, and it was for young people specifically. But basically you just sat in a room and in silence in my case, because everything was like trapped inside, and she just, I don't know if she just wasn't qualified, or I don't know what, she just expected me to talk about traumatic experiences, and I didn't even know in my own head how the traumatic experiences were working, let alone bringing them outside and talking about them. So it was basically a waste of an hour for a year of my life. But anyway, so the reason I wasn't eating and I ended up at the doctor's was because I was about 13, so I was in about year 9 at secondary school, and from pretty much the get-go that I started secondary school, I, like a lot of other people all over the world, of teenagers, including my own husband, I was bullied. Now, usually I say I was bullied, and then people are like, oh, that's horrible, I was bullied too, and we have a conversation about bullying. And that's what I used to always say all the time, was that I was bullied at school, because it's true. But most people, I found, I didn't realise this was weird at the time, but I found later that most people, when they're bullied, are bullied by someone of the same sex. So if you're a guy, you might get beaten up and bullied by some other guys, and if you're a girl, you tend to get bullied by other girls. That's like normal. But for me, that wasn't the case. I say normal, like bullying, but I suppose it is. So many people get bullied, it kind of is normal. Sad, isn't it? But that wasn't the case for me. I was bullied by two guys. I'm going to call them G and D. It is relevant because they were very different and had different roles. But when we say we're bullied, they were like the instigators, but if you've been bullied yourself, that there's always a big group that are there to like egg them on and laugh and stuff like this. But they were the two instigators, the two people that said and did things. So yeah, I'm going to call them D and G. Now looking back, G was like your stereotypical school bully. He clearly wasn't very secure in himself, was just made jokes all the time, and honestly, when he wasn't making them at other people, at other people's expenses, he was funny. He could make teachers laugh and everybody laugh, and he was funny. But obviously when they were at other people's expenses, they became not so funny, and I was the butt of most of his jokes. And he was just really nasty, unrelenting. He was in my tutor group, so for the first 3 years he was in every single class with me, and then when we went to GCSE levels, he was clever than me, and maybe that was why he was bored a lot of the time at school, so this is the way of him entertaining himself, I don't know. He was in some of the other classes, and then when I went to sixth form, which is in the same school, he was also in sixth form, but I had no classes with him. So I very, very rarely came across him really, because I had my own group of friends and he had his group of friends, and that was it. And I know since then, since we left school, that he had bullied several other people in my year, and a couple of them come forward and said, yeah, that he did that to me as well, he was bullying. And I was like, I wasn't surprised, that was just the kind of person that he is. And but I think he's also the kind of person that probably isn't like that as an adult, if that makes sense. I saw him once, I think I've only seen him once since I left school, and it was on the bus into Nottingham from where we live. Well, he didn't live in the same village, but he was with some friends, and he always used to be, he had to have his audience, so he always had to be with a group of people to say anything. And we're on the bus together, and we're sitting really close, and I was like getting prepared. I had that sort of fight or flight kind of mode, like, oh god, here he is, he's going to start with all these jokes and all this kind of thing. I was just going to go into my little mind palace and pretend I couldn't hear him, like I always done at school. He didn't say a thing to me, even though his friends were there, which I thought was really odd. And the way he looked at me, he just sort of looked at me like, I don't know, or maybe I'm imagining it, but I felt like he was actually sorry for what he'd done. And he's never apologised, and I've never spoken to him or seen him since school. So that might be completely made up, he might be still an asshole. But I think genuinely he was like a typical school bully, looking back. But I remember once, it was really funny, we got put together, sit next to each other in art, because my tutor group were really, were just really horrible and misbehaved a lot. And we used to get set into certain places, so that we were less likely to be disruptive in class. And we were in art, and we ended up getting sat next to each other. He didn't say a thing to me or class. It was the most peaceful class I ever remember when I was at secondary school. He didn't say a word because he didn't have his friends around him to say stuff. And when they weren't there, he just didn't say anything at all. Now with G, I don't actually really remember a lot of what he said. I vaguely remember. But as I've grown up, I think I've sort of just dismissed it and got over it, if that makes sense. Like, his things that he said haven't made a deep enough impact on me to affect my life going forward so much. But I can't say the same for D. He was completely different to G, which is why I've separated the two. They didn't necessarily work together. Sometimes they did, and they were both involved in some of the bullying. But D is where I struggle to talk about more, and where I think the trauma lies, and this is where I can get upset and also get back. I'm going to try and talk about it as much detail as I can, but there are going to be things I'm going to miss out about him, because it's too hard, even now at the age of 34, to talk about, because even in my own head it's not completely right yet, and when I start talking about him, it leads on to other things. And this is why I usually just stop when I say I was bullied and don't go further. Not because of G, but because of D. But I'm going to attempt to talk about it, so please bear with me. And if I cry, I'll have to stop the video. I apologise. So D, I feel like before I go into it, it's probably really important to tell you that my bullying incidents happened in class. So they didn't happen before school or lunch break or after school or whatever. They happened in class, so the teacher was always present when these things were going on. I feel like that's quite important for me to say first. And D had two sides to him. The one side was probably the most scary side, when he was like happy and really sort of like everything's great and in a good mood. And he used to sit next to me sometimes. And when I say sit next to me, I mean he practically sat on me. That's probably a better solution, description. And he'd put his arm around me, and he'd, like, I used to wear these short, I say short skirts, it wasn't short because we were at school, but like just above the knee skirts. And I used to wear tights, but my parents were quite old fashioned, so they insisted on girls wearing skirts. Eventually I wore trousers, and luckily my sister ended up just wearing trousers, but it was quite an old-fashioned thing to do because everyone else wore trousers, or the other girls did. And he used to like put his hand on my thigh, and he used to like stroke my thigh, and he used to like push his hand off, and then he'd just put his hand back on and laugh because he thought it was funny. And he used to put his arm around me, he used to like go really close to me like this and put his arm around my shoulders, and I could feel him like practically breathing on my neck, and I'd push him away and he'd just like hold on even tighter. Or sometimes he said we'd be in class and just, you know, stuff like that. And I never really thought of it as having a name. I knew it was wrong, like I felt it was wrong, but it was happening in front of teachers and other students and no one said it was wrong, so I thought maybe I was just being weird. And then it wasn't until much, much later when I did research about bullying and things that actually turned out to be sexual bullying. Because the thing comments used to make on my boobs and just my body in general, but I remember personally just about my boobs as well, is like putting his hands on me, I'm going to say. And yeah, G never did anything like that. I remember once when we were in English class, he used to de-egged him on saying, put your arm around her, put your arm around her. And he came and he sat on the same table as me, like a big gap between the two of us, and he sort of went like that because he was being egged on, and he was so uncomfortable that it almost made me laugh more than anything else, because he looked as uncomfortable as I felt through everything. And it happened, that kind of thing happened quite a lot when I was at school, and it was just Dee that used to do it, no one else used to. A lot of people, like looking back, would say it's because he fancied you. I'm not sure that makes that okay, and I'm not sure it makes it okay to be assaulted pretty much every day just because we're at school and we're two kids the same age. I'm going to stop talking about that part of it now because I don't want to make myself ill or, you know, upset myself or whatever. He did have another side to him as well, Dee did, and that was quite a vicious one. He'd be quite nasty. He'd tell me that I was stupid, that I never did anything right, that I wasn't good enough. And that voice, his voice, is what follows me now when I have depression and anxiety. It sort of comes into, his voice comes into my head, and it's him I hear that tells me I'm no good, that I'm better off not being here, that I'm letting everybody down, that I'm a bane in everyone's life because of the problems that I have, that everyone just wants to be, their life would be easier without me. It's his voice that I hear. Sorry about that noise in the background. Some kind of roadworks. That should be better. I've shut the window, but it's really hot in here. Hang on, I'm going to switch the fan on. Sorry about that small interlude. So I thought I'd just quickly sort of say about my parents, because a lot of people ask if I told my parents about being bullied. It's a common question, and the answer is yes, I did. I told my mum quite some time before we ended up at the doctors about being bullied, but she sort of dismissed it. And then obviously she heard more about it when my friend's mum phoned up and told us about being the not eating and going to the doctors. I'm fully aware, after having gone to a counsellor and psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist pointing out to me when I was talking about it, that my parents let me down when I was a teenager, that they could have helped me. There's many things that they could have done, but they chose not to. It's something I've struggled to understand because of the way I feel about my husband, about my sister, my friends, and even my dog, and the lengths I will go to and have done to protect them and help them. And they are not my child, and you assume that the greatest love, everyone always says this, the greatest love you ever feel is for your child, and that you've never felt any love like it until you've had a child. And if that is true, like everyone, like a lot of people say, then that makes their behaviour less understandable, and I don't understand it, and I'm not going to pretend I understand it. I've built a support system without them. They are not part of my support system. I do talk to them sometimes because my mum will phone up and say things, but I do not depend on them. I have my husband, my sister, and my friends for that. And when I feel low or I'm particularly vulnerable with my illness and with my depression and my anxiety, then I don't automatically go to my parents. I don't go to them when something happy happens or something sad happens. That's why I didn't tell them about the fertility, because sometimes they can be okay now. As I'm older, they've sort of realised that I'm not doing it for attention and things, but it's a bit sporadic. If they're busy or they're away, they're not going to drop everything to come and help me. Whereas I know that the other people I mentioned would. So I just don't feel the need to tell them about what's happening in my life, basically. I moved out when I was about 24. I wanted to move out of home since I was about 16, but I had no money, so I didn't. So when I was about 24, I bought this house with John. We've been together since I was 20. I was only just 24 at the time. I almost moved in with John's parents and brother and him beforehand because things got so bad with my parents. They weren't very supportive of moving out. My mum thought it was too soon to be moving out with John. They didn't help at all. My dad was a bit better when asking about mortgages and stuff, but when I got to the mortgage advisor and was telling him about it, he didn't think I understood it properly and was like, I'm just going to talk to John about it. And it turned out that actually John just said exactly what I'd said. So it's possible my dad didn't understand it rather than anyone else. But anyway, and my dad, I've always thought, thinks that I'm stupid. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe that is what it's all about. But when I was a teenager, he sort of added on to my feelings of inadequacy and feeling stupid that Dee had started, because academically wise my sister was an all-rounder. I was very much English and history orientated like my mum. My dad's much more like mathematical and stuff, and my sister was an all-rounder and got really good grades at school. She also was not bullied at school, just want to point that out as well. So she had a bit of an easier time. But obviously school for all teenagers isn't exactly the most amazing place, is it? And yeah, she's much more like my dad in a lot of places, a lot of reasons, and you know, she's daddy's little girl still now. But so I guess all that didn't help, and I think my mum and dad sort of put me back too much into being a teenager when I'm around them a lot, because I associate quite a lot of negative feelings when I was a teenager with them, and I sometimes feel like I'm back there again with them. I've never been diagnosed with anything like PTSD, I just want to put that out there, because I've never really spoken about this to the healthcare professional or anything like that. I did not like counselling, I didn't like psychiatrists, so I've not gone for some time, many years, to any of those because I just didn't get on with it at all. I just struggle to talk about this stuff, I guess. I mean, maybe I'll be better now, and now I'm just like, oh, it's just inconvenient, I can't bother. It's not necessarily the good thing to do, but anyway. So I do have problems sometimes with things going back to when I was a teenager. Like, I don't think I'm in the same situation. I don't picture a classroom or an incident where, you know, as such, but it's almost like I revert back. I always say I revert back to my 13-year-old self and forget that I'm now an adult and know so much more, and, you know, have a voice, and I'm not shy like I was before, and I'm not scared to put my opinion across now, whereas when I was a teenager I was. But I do feel like I revert, certain situations might revert back to that, and my parents do, and that's one of the reasons why I don't see them as much as like my sister does. And sometimes my mum messages me and goes, oh, do you fancy coming over? And I'm like, what? I only saw you like yesterday. And then I do some calculations and realise it's more months ago, and I'm like, oh, whoops, sorry, probably should go and see them. But yeah, there's other incidents in my life which is relevant to what's happening now, which is why I'm sharing this video for you. That puts me back to being 13. One of the situations was the fertility problems, because I didn't have a smear test for years and years and years. I struggled to trust someone to not do something they shouldn't do between my legs when doing the smear test, because even though it was a man that clearly didn't understand that I wasn't his property, there were women around who let it happen, such as my mum, such as female other students that I was with, female teachers. So I didn't feel like anyone would stand and say, no, you shouldn't do that people would just watch. I felt like, and still feel like, the only person I can trust 100% to keep me safe is myself. So even though I trust John as far as I can, and my sister as far as I can, there's a limit to how much I can trust them to help me. So John came with me on my first ever smear test, and the only reason I had my smear test in the end was for fertility reasons. As it happens, everything was fine. And actually I managed to get through that without it's like I go back into fight or flight mode, because I'm scared for my safety, like I was almost all the time when I was a teenager. So I go back into like a fight or flight mode, and I was worried that would happen, that I'd start panicking and want to get out of the place I was, because I didn't feel safe and I felt like they were going to hurt me. And that's what I was worried about with the smear test. And I felt like I might feel violated, because I made a pact in myself, in my head, when I was a teenager. I was never ever going to let anyone treat me like they treated me. I was never going to let anyone do that again, and I might get upset at this point, I'm sorry, but with the fertility, things that go with the fertility, obviously I've had a lot of intrusive things that happen. So I've had a lot of scans and things, and I got through them okay because I think it was a woman doing it. But then when I had the egg collection and they put me into general anaesthetic, I couldn't protect myself, and I didn't trust anyone else to do it, to protect me. Because when I was a teenager, my own parents didn't do it. Oh, sorry. So, the only person I felt that could protect me was me, and I was going to be out with general anaesthetic. And John couldn't be there because, you know, hygiene and all that, so he couldn't be there for the egg collection, and, you know, just be in the way or whatever. And I never told any of the doctors or nurses because I knew they wouldn't understand, and they just think I was being silly. Oh God. But yeah, I ended up with some tears before I had the general anaesthetic for the egg collection in May now, and it's now end of August. And he, I think, thought I was just worried about general anaesthetic. And I thought, there's no point me telling you, because you're a man for starters, you won't understand the same. So the anaesthetist was male, and the man who did the egg collections and was going in between my legs was male. And I didn't mind so much when, because it was the same man, it was in a man who put the eggs back in again. I didn't mind that so much because I was awake, so I was fully aware of what I was doing, and I coped with that better, and I didn't feel, and I think because I felt violated with the egg collection for the first time since I was a teenager, I thought, well, oh God. I'm going to keep this in. I'm determined to keep this in, even though I'm like, God, I'm such an ugly cry. I'm really sorry. I hope this video isn't too close. But anyway, so when I had obviously the operation, I was into general anaesthetic. It wasn't as bad as before, but obviously, like I said, like you have these paper pants on, and obviously they're down around that area, and the paper pants aren't there anymore. But you remember putting them on, but then they're not on. Well, they are on, but they've been cut, and they can just come undone, and you have to take like your thing off and stuff. And again, no one is there that you know. And as I said, even if there was women, I struggle. Like, I don't mind so much women because they weren't the people who did stuff, so I can cope with that. But if it's men doing stuff and there's women there, that doesn't help because women quite often let other women do things. So yeah, so I basically what I'm trying to tell you is that, you know, previous things with my mental health and things that happened when I was younger can affect you, and has affected me through this, which has made everything that's happened with the fertility harder to deal with. And as you can see, I haven't completely got my head around it or dealt with it yet, and this is the bit where I feel like I should maybe have counselling about. But when I go to the counsellor, it's like three free sessions is funded. And like, what are they going to cover in 3 free sessions? Like, how am I going to tell them stuff that happened that actually that stuff is affecting what's happening now, making it worse? Isn't really going to... I don't know. But anyway, this is why I wanted to share the video for, but I'm probably going to end it now because clearly I'm upset. And I started off saying I wasn't going to go into too much detail to make myself ill, and I clearly just disregarded that advice to myself. But I'm okay. I'll be okay because I am. As I said, I have a great support network. I have things in place to help me cope with things, with memories, with other things. But thank you for watching this, and I hope it made sense because it was in a lot of sections, and I apologise for that. It's very hot today as well, and it's a little bit distracting for me. But yeah, so thank you for watching anyway, and if you like this vlog, then please give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share this and the fertility vlogs especially, because I think they're the most important vlogs and messages I'm trying to get across, or trying to open the conversation off. So if you could subscribe and share and like this vlog and those vlogs, that would be amazing. Thank you.